I'm Sarah, I'm 46 years old, and yesterday, I walked into a five-star restaurant and watched my husband's life fall apart in exactly 10 seconds. Before I tell you how I left him homeless and screaming in front of 50 diners, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I love seeing how far this story travels. The Golden Oak is the kind of place where they don't put prices on the menu because if you have to ask, you shouldn't be there. The lighting is low, the tablecloths are that crisp, heavy linen that feels like money, and the air smells like truffle oil and expensive perfume. It was my husband Mark's favorite spot. He loved it because it made him feel important. He loved it even more when he was sitting there with a woman who wasn't me. I stood at the maitre d's podium, smoothing the front of my dress. I wasn't wearing my usual paint-splattered jeans or the oversized sweaters Mark always criticized. I was wearing a black silk dress that cost more than Mark's car payment, and for the first time in months, my hair was done professionally. The hostess, a young girl who looked terrified of me, glanced down at her reservation book. "Ma'am, do you have a reservation?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm joining a party." "Mr. Jenkins. Table 4, by the window." I didn't wait for her to check. I knew exactly where they were. I knew because I had access to the joint credit card alert that had popped up on my phone 2 hours ago, the Golden Oak. Charge, $450. A deposit for the tasting menu. I walked through the dining room. My heels clicked against the polished mahogany floor, a sharp, rhythmic sound that cut through the low hum of conversation. Click. 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 It sounded like a countdown. I spotted them. Mark was sitting with his back to the room, but I knew the set of his shoulders. He was wearing his navy suit, the one I had picked up from the dry cleaners 3 days ago. And sitting across from him, laughing with her head thrown back, was Jessica. My best friend. Jessica, who I had loaned $10,000 to start her spa business. Jessica, who had cried on my shoulder when her mother passed away. Jessica, who was currently wearing a diamond necklace that I recognized immediately because Mark had told me he bought it as an investment for our retirement portfolio. I stopped about 5 feet from their table. They were so wrapped up in their own little bubble of victory they didn't even notice me. "Next week," Mark was saying, swirling his red wine. "By next week, the lawyers will have the papers ready. We'll give her 30 days to vacate. I'll tell her the maintenance is too much for her to handle alone." Jessica giggled, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "Oh, Mark, you're terrible. But seriously, that house needs a woman's touch. Sarah has such drab taste. I'm thinking we knock down the wall between the kitchen and the dining room. Open concept." "Whatever you want, babe," Mark said, leaning in. "It's going to be your house soon." My blood ran cold, but my hands didn't shake. Not this time. I had spent the last 3 days crying until I was dehydrated, but tonight? Tonight I was the desert. Dry and scorching hot. I stepped into their line of sight. "I wouldn't hire a contractor just yet, Jessica," I said. The silence that fell over the table was instant. It was violent. Mark jumped so hard his wine sloshed over the rim of the glass, staining the pristine white tablecloth like a fresh wound. He spun around in his chair, his eyes wide. "Sarah," he choked out. Jessica froze. Her hand was still midair, reaching for him. She slowly pulled it back, her face draining of color until she looked like a ghost with too much lipstick. "Sarah," Mark stammered, standing up, his napkin falling to the floor. What are you doing here? You said you were staying in tonight." "I lied," I said, offering a tight, razor-thin smile. "Just like you lied about the business trip to Chicago last weekend. Just like you lied about this necklace being an investment." I looked directly at Jessica. Although, to be fair, seeing it on Jess does confirm it's a cheap depreciation asset. Jessica gasped. "Sarah, please, don't make a scene." "A scene?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Jess, honey, sleeping with my husband is a scene. Eating lobster on my credit card is a scene. This? This is just business. Lower your voice, Mark hissed, looking around frantically. People at nearby tables were starting to stare. The couple at table 5 had stopped eating entirely. We can talk about this at home. Home, I repeated the word, tasting it. That's actually what I came to talk about. You were just discussing renovations, weren't you? Knocking down walls? Mark straightened his tie, trying to regain some of his arrogance. Look, Sarah, I was going to tell you. Things haven't been working between us. Jess and we have a connection. I'm filing for divorce. And yes, I'm keeping the house. It's my house. I paid for everything in it. He looked so confident. He genuinely believed that because he was the man, because he wore the suit, because he had the loud voice, he owned the world. I reached into my clutch. I didn't pull out a gun, but the piece of paper I placed on the table did more damage than a bullet ever could. It was a single sheet of paper. A photocopy of a wire transfer confirmation and a closing statement. Actually, Mark, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. You don't own the house. You never did. My name, and only my name, was on the deed. Inheritance law is tricky like that. Mark looked at the paper. He squinted, confused. What is this? That, I pointed a manicured finger at the document, is the closing statement. I sold the house yesterday morning. A private cash buyer. Very eager. Mark blinked. Once. Twice. You sold it? I did, I nodded. And since the buyer wanted immediate possession in exchange for a cash premium, I agreed. The locks are being changed tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. And since I've already moved all my belongings out. I paused for effect, locking eyes with him. That means your things are currently in trash bags on the curb. I'd hurry if I were you. It looks like rain. Mark's face turned a color I had never seen on a human being before, a mix of purple and gray. You can't do that, he shouted. He actually shouted. The entire restaurant went silent. That's my house. You sold my house? My house, I corrected him calmly. And I sold it for $2.5 million. The money is already in a trust account you can't touch. I looked at Jessica. She looked sick. She looked like she was doing mental math and realizing the sum was zero. So, I continued, backing away slowly. You two enjoy your dinner. I canceled the credit card on my way in, so I hope you brought cash, Mark. I hear the lobster thermidor is market price. Sarah. Mark lunged forward, grabbing the edge of the table. You come back here. You fix this. Sarah. I turned my back on them. As I walked away, I heard the sound of a glass shattering against the floor and Mark screaming my name. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. But to understand why that moment felt so good, to understand why destroying my own marriage felt like being born again, you have to understand who I was before I walked into the Golden Oak. You have to understand the 3 months of hell that led to this moment. 3 months ago, if you had asked me to describe my life, I would have used the word blessed. I was the definition of a happy suburban wife. I spent my days covered in drywall dust and paint samples, and my evenings cooking dinner for a man I adored. The house, the one I just sold out from under him, wasn't just a building. It was a Victorian manor that had been in my family for 3 generations. My grandmother left it to me in her will 5 years ago. It was a wreck when I got it. The roof leaked, the floors were rotted, and the garden was a jungle of poison ivy. Mark had looked at it and sneered. Tear it down, Sarah. Sell the land. We can buy a nice, modern condo downtown. No, I had said, feeling a fierce protectiveness I couldn't explain. This is my history. I'm going to fix it. And I did. I used every penny of the inheritance money my grandmother left me to restore it. I didn't hire a fancy general contractor to manage it, I managed it. I learned how to sand original hardwood floors until my hands were blistered. I learned how to glaze antique windows. I spent 2 years breathing life back into that house while Mark sat in our apartment watching football and complaining about the dust on my clothes. When we finally moved in, suddenly, the narrative changed. We threw a housewarming party. I remember standing in the kitchen, my dream kitchen, with the Italian marble I had hand-selected, arranging appetizers. I could hear Mark in the living room holding court with his golf buddies. Yeah, Mark's booming voice drifted in. It was a hell of a project. Took me about 2 years to get it right. You know how it is, you have to be on top of these contractors every day. I told them, I want the best insulation, the best finishes. Cost me a fortune, but look at it. It's a palace. I froze, a tray of bruschetta in my hand. Took him 2 years? Mark hadn't lifted a finger. He hadn't painted a single wall. He hadn't even chosen the color of the bathroom grout. Jessica was standing next to me in the kitchen, helping me pour wine. She heard it too. I looked at her, rolling my eyes. Can you believe him? I whispered, expecting her to share my annoyance. Jessica didn't roll her eyes. She smiled, a strange, tight little smile. Oh, Sarah, let him have his moment. Men need to feel like providers. It's important for his ego. You know how hard he works at the dealership. He sells cars, Jess. He doesn't build houses, I muttered, but I let it go. That was my mistake. I always let it go. Jessica Miller was my person. We met 10 years ago at a yoga class. She was bubbly, chaotic, and always broke. I was the grounded one. When she wanted to open her spa, Serenity Now, no bank would give her a loan. Her credit score was a disaster. I sat down with Mark. I want to lend Jess the money, I said. From my savings. Mark had thrown a fit. She's a loser, Sarah. You'll never see that dime again. She's my best friend, I insisted. And I believe in her. I wrote her a check for $10,000. She cried. She hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. I'll pay you back, she sobbed. I promise, Sarah. You're my sister. I'd die for you. Fast forward to 3 months ago. The changes were subtle at first. Mark started coming home late. Inventory checks, he'd say. Client dinners. He started buying new clothes, shirts that were tighter, more fashionable than his usual style. He started going to the gym, obsessing over his abs. And he became mean. It wasn't physical abuse. He never hit me. But he picked at me. He picked at me until I felt like I was made of nothing but flaws. Why do you wear those jeans? He asked one Tuesday evening while I was cooking lasagna. They make you look wide. I looked down at myself. These are my working jeans, Mark. I was sanding the guest room banister today. You always look like a laborer, he scoffed, pouring himself a drink. Look at Jessica. She always looks put together. She takes pride in her appearance. Maybe you should spend less time with your sawdust and more time at her spa. That stung. But I swallowed it. I thought he was just stressed about work. Then came the gaslighting. I would find things out of place. A receipt for a dinner for 2 at a sushi place I hated. Mark, did you go to Kodo last night? I asked, holding the receipt I found in the laundry. He snatched it from my hand. Are you crazy? That's from a client lunch 3 weeks ago. Why are you snooping through my pockets? You're becoming paranoid, Sarah. It's not attractive. I started to doubt my own memory. Had I seen that date wrong? Was I being paranoid? I went to Jessica for advice. I sat in her office at the spa, smelling the lavender and eucalyptus, pouring my heart out. He's just so distant, Jess, I said, wiping away tears. And he keeps comparing me to you. He says I should be more like you. Jessica sighed, coming around her desk to rub my shoulders. Her hands felt warm and comforting. Oh, sweetie. Mark is just a man. He's going through a midlife crisis. He doesn't mean it. He loves you. You just need to be more supportive. Give him space. Don't nag him about the receipts. That drives men away. You think I'm nagging? I asked, feeling a fresh wave of insecurity. I think you're anxious, she said softly. And anxiety is heavy energy. Maybe you should take a trip? Go visit your mom in Florida for a week? Give Mark a chance to miss you. Maybe you're right, I sniffled. You're always right, Jess. I look back at that moment now and I want to scream at myself. She wasn't giving me advice. She was clearing the board. She was trying to get me out of town so they could play house in my house. But I didn't go to Florida. And thank God I didn't. Because if I had left, I never would have found the iPad. It was a Tuesday. A perfectly normal, boring Tuesday. Mark had called me at 4 p.m. Hey, he said, his voice clipped and professional. I have to fly to Chicago tonight. Emergency meeting with the regional distributors. I won't be back until Thursday. Oh, I said, disappointed. I was making pot roast. Freeze it, he said. I have to go. Pack a bag. Love you, bye. The love you sounded automatic, like a robot programmed to say it at the end of a transaction. I spent the evening doing what I always did, working on the house. I was stenciling the ceiling in the library. It was meticulous, backbreaking work, but it kept my mind off the empty side of the bed. Around 9 p.m., I went downstairs to make tea. I sat on the sofa in the living room, surrounded by the silence of the big house. Mark's old iPad was sitting on the coffee table. He had bought a new one last week, the latest model, and had tossed this one aside. Sarah, wipe that thing and give it to Goodwill, he had told me. I hadn't gotten around to it yet. I picked it up, thinking I'd check the weather for the weekend. I pressed the home button. It still had a 15% charge. Because Mark had set up his new device using his Apple ID, and because he is technically illiterate, he hadn't realized that his iMessage was syncing across both devices. He hadn't logged out of the old one. As soon as the screen lit up, a banner notification slid down from the top. Jess, the room service here is amazing. Champagne is on ice. Hurry up, Daddy. I stared at the screen. The words didn't make sense. Jess? My Jess? Daddy? My brain tried to reject it. Maybe it was a joke? Maybe it was a wrong number? Then another message popped up. Mark, just parked the rental. Coming up now. Can't wait to see you in that red lace thing I bought you. My teacup slipped from my hand. It didn't shatter, but it tipped over, spilling hot chamomile tea all over the Persian rug. I didn't even notice the heat. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type in the passcode. It was 1-2-3-4. Mark was a simple man. I unlocked the iPad and opened the Messages app. And there it was. The entire history of my humiliation. It wasn't just a fling. It wasn't a drunken mistake. It had been going on for 6 months. I scrolled up, reading messages that felt like physical punches to the gut. Mark, August 12th, she's talking about paint colors again. God, she's boring. I miss your laugh. Jess, August 12th, poor baby. Just endure it a little longer. Think about the house. Once she's out, we can redo that hideous kitchen. Mark, September 4th, I told her I'm working late. Meet me at the Motel 6 off the highway. I need you. Jess, October 1st, did you see those jeans she wore today? She looks like a lumberjack. You deserve someone who looks good on your arm, Mark. I ran to the bathroom and vomited. I retched until there was nothing left, heaving dry sobs into the toilet bowl. The betrayal was a physical toxin. It wasn't just Mark. I expected Mark to be weak. But Jess? Jessica, who had sat at my kitchen table last week and eaten my cake. Jessica, who I had loaned money to. Jessica, who knew every insecurity I had because I told them to her. I went back to the iPad. I needed to see everything. I needed to cauterize the wound with the truth. I found a video sent 3 days ago. I clicked play. It was taken in my bedroom. My bed. The bed I slept in every night. Mark and Jessica were rolling around on my Egyptian cotton sheets. They were laughing. Tell me, Jessica purred, holding the camera up to Mark's face. Tell me whose house this is going to be. Mark grinned, a look of pure malice in his eyes. It's going to be the Jenkins Miller residence. As soon as I get her to sign that post-nup revision or prove she's mentally unstable. I'm working on the gaslighting angle. She's already questioning her memory. You're bad, Jessica giggled. I'm smart, Mark said. She put all her inheritance into this place. It's worth millions now. If we play this right, we get the house, we get the equity, and she gets the cats. The video ended. I sat there in the dark living room for 4 hours. I didn't cry anymore. The tears had stopped. Something else was taking over. A cold, hard clarity. They weren't just having an affair. They were plotting a heist. They were trying to steal my grandmother's legacy. They were trying to paint me as crazy, mentally unstable, so they could take everything. I looked around the room. I looked at the crown molding I had painted by hand. I looked at the fireplace mantel I had restored. You think you can take this from me? I thought. You think I'm just the boring wife in the paint-stained jeans? I stood up. I picked up the iPad and walked to the kitchen. I wrapped it in 3 layers of plastic wrap and hid it inside the empty cavity of a frozen turkey in the deep freeze. It was the only place I knew Mark would never look, because Mark never cooked. Then I went upstairs to my office. I pulled out the file cabinet. I found the deed to the house. I found the renovation receipts. I found the bank statements showing exactly where the money came from. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the architect of their destruction. And I had a lot of work to do. The next morning, I called in sick to my freelance clients. I put on my most professional suit, a navy blue blazer that made me look like I meant business, and drove to the city. I didn't go to our family lawyer. Mark played golf with him. I went to David Thorne. David Thorne was a legend in our town. He was 70 years old, wore bow ties unironically, and had a reputation for being a shark in a grandfather's cardigan. He specialized in high-asset divorces and estate law. I sat in his mahogany-paneled office, my hands folded on my lap. I placed a USB drive on his desk. I had downloaded everything from the iPad before hiding it. Mr. Thorne, I said. My husband and my best friend are sleeping together. They are plotting to steal my house and have me declared mentally incompetent to seize my assets. I want to know my options. David Thorne didn't blink. He plugged in the drive, put on his reading glasses, and clicked through the files. For 10 minutes, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the grandfather clock and his occasional hum. Finally, he leaned back. He took off his glasses. Well, he said, his voice gravelly and calm. They are certainly ambitious, aren't they? Can they do it? I asked. Can they take the house? In Georgia, David began, tenting his fingers, marital property is divided equitably. Usually, the house is considered marital property if you lived in it together. My heart stopped. But I inherited it. Wait, he held up a hand. The house was inherited. That makes it separate property initially. The question is commingling. Did you use marital funds, Mark's salary, a joint account, to pay for the renovations? Did you put his name on the deed? No, I said firmly. My grandmother's will was specific. It went to me. I kept the deed in my name only. Mark complained about it for years, but I never changed it. And the renovations? I paid for materials from the inheritance trust account. I did the labor myself. David smiled. It was a terrifying, shark-like smile. Excellent. Smart girl. If he didn't contribute financially to the asset, and his name isn't on the title, and you have a paper trail showing the funds came from a separate inheritance, then it's not marital property, Sarah. It's yours. 100%. I let out a breath I had been holding for 12 hours. However, David continued, his face turning serious. If you divorce him now, he will fight. He will claim sweat equity, claim he helped fix it up. He will drag this out in court for 2 years. He will live in the house during the proceedings. He will bring that woman into your home while the judge decides. The thought of Jessica walking through my halls, touching my things, made me nauseous. I can't let that happen, I said. Then we have to be aggressive, David said. You have 2 options. Option A, we file for divorce, get a restraining order based on their plot to gaslight you, and fight it out. Option B. He paused, looking at me over his glasses. What's option B? You liquidate the asset, David said softly. You sell the house. Now. Before the divorce papers are filed. Before he files any lease pendants to stop a sale. You turn that house into cash. Cash is liquid. Cash can be moved into a protected trust account. A house is a sitting duck. Sell the house? I whispered. But I love that house. I poured my soul into it. Sarah, David leaned forward. Do you love the house more than you hate the idea of Mark taking half of it? Do you love the house enough to live in a war zone for 2 years? I thought about the video. Mark and Jess in my bed. Laughing at me. Planning to lock me away. I realized something in that moment. The house wasn't a home anymore. They had tainted it. It was a crime scene. Sell it, I said. How fast can we do it? I have a client, David said. An investment group looking for high-end heritage properties in this area. They buy cash. They close in 72 hours. No inspections. No for sale sign in the yard. Do it, I said. There is one catch, David warned. If you sell it, you have to vacate immediately upon closing. And you can't tell Mark. If he finds out, he can file an emergency injunction to stop the sale claiming it's a marital asset dispute. You have to do this in complete secrecy. He's in Chicago until Thursday, I said. Today is Wednesday. Then we move fast, David picked up the phone. I'll draft the paperwork. You start packing. But Sarah? Only pack what you can explain away. If he sees boxes, he'll know. I left that office with a mission. I wasn't sad anymore. I was a soldier. Mark came home on Thursday evening. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. My hands were steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had already met with the investors. They loved the house. They offered $2.5 million. It was slightly under market value, but it was all cash, and they agreed to a 24-hour closing. The paperwork was signed. The wire transfer was scheduled for Friday morning, tomorrow. But tonight, I had to play the loving wife one last time. Hey, Mark grunted, dropping his bag in the hallway. He didn't kiss me. He walked straight to the fridge and grabbed a beer. God, Chicago was a nightmare. Meetings all day. I missed you, I lied. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. How was the hotel? Mark stiffened slightly. Fine. Standard corporate stuff. Boring. He was wearing the same shirt he had worn in the video with Jessica. I could practically smell her cheap vanilla perfume on him. You look tired, I said, forcing a look of concern. Why don't you go relax in the den? I'll bring you dinner. Yeah, whatever, he muttered. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. Did you move the remote? I can't find it. Here it goes. The gaslighting. It's on the side table, Mark. Where it always is. No, it's not, he snapped. I looked. You always hide things, Sarah. You're getting so forgetful lately. It's worrying. Maybe you should see a doctor. I clenched the knife I was using to cut carrots. I squeezed the handle until my knuckles turned white. I am not crazy. You are evil. I'll look for it later, I said softly. Sorry. Useless, he mumbled under his breath as he walked away. As soon as he was gone, I moved into action. I had been smuggling things out of the house for 2 days. I couldn't move the furniture, that would be too obvious. But the small, valuable things? They were gone. My grandmother's pearl earrings? In a safety deposit box. The antique silver collection? Wrapped in towels at the bottom of my gym bag and dropped off at my storage unit. My personal files, my hard drives, my passport? Gone. But there was one thing left. The photo albums. The memories of my life before Mark. They were in the bookcase in the den, right where Mark was sitting. I walked into the den with a tray of food. Mark was watching ESPN. Here you go, I said, setting the tray down. Thanks, he didn't look up. I walked over to the bookcase. I'm just going to grab this old album, I said casually. I want to show my mom a picture of Grandma's wedding dress. She asked about it. Mark glanced at me, annoyed. Can't you do that later? You're blocking the TV. It'll just take a second, I pulled the heavy leather album off the shelf. God, you're so clumsy, Mark groaned as I almost dropped it. You're like a bull in a china shop, Sarah. Honestly, I don't know how you manage to dress yourself in the morning. I held the album to my chest. Enjoy the TV, Mark. It's the last night you'll ever watch it in this room. I love you, Mark, I said. I needed to say it. I needed to say it to remind myself of the tragedy of it all. To remind myself that I did love him, and he threw it away like garbage. He chewed his steak, eyes glued to the screen. Yeah. Sure. I walked out of the room. I went upstairs to the guest room, where I had been sleeping because of his snoring. I shoved the album into my suitcase hidden under the bed. My phone buzzed. It was a text from David Thorne. The wire has cleared. The money is in your account. The deed transfer is recorded. The house is no longer yours. You are officially a tenant. The new owners take possession tomorrow at 5 p.m. I stared at the screen. I was a millionaire. And I was homeless. I felt a hysterical giggle bubbling up in my throat. I clamped my hand over my mouth to stifle it. The plan was set. Tomorrow was Friday. Mark had a late meeting, a date with Jessica. I would tell him I was going out with friends. But then, I heard Mark's voice from downstairs. He was on the phone. He sounded angry. I crept to the top of the stairs. I told you, I'll have it. Mark was hissing. Stop calling the house number. My wife might pick up. I froze. Who was he talking to? Listen to me, Mark's voice rose in panic. The deal is happening. I'm getting the house. It's worth $3 million easy. I'll take a HELOC, home equity line of credit, out against it as soon as the title is in my name. I'll pay you back double. Just give me 2 more weeks. My blood ran cold. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was in debt. Deep debt. I know it's a lot of money, Mark was sweating, I could hear it in his voice. But I can't pay you until I get the house. If you break my legs, you get nothing. Wait for the divorce. It's a sure thing. She's stupid. She doesn't suspect a thing. I backed away from the stairs, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. This changed everything. He wasn't just trying to steal the house out of greed. He was desperate. He had probably gambled away money or made a bad investment, and he had promised my house as collateral to some very dangerous people. If I hadn't sold the house, if I had waited for the divorce, the court might have frozen the assets. His creditors could have put liens on the property. I could have lost everything fighting his debt. Selling the house wasn't just revenge anymore. It was a rescue mission. I went back to my room and locked the door. I checked my bank app. There it was. The balance. $2,500,000. Safe. Liquid. Mine. I slept like a baby that night. Mark slept in the master bedroom, dreaming of stealing a fortune that was already gone. Friday morning was surreal. I woke up knowing it was the last time I would see sunlight hitting the floorboards I had restored. Mark left early. Big day at the dealership, he said. He was wearing his best suit. The navy one. The one he would wear to dinner tonight. Good luck, I said. I'm sure you'll close the deal. He smirked. I always do. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I turned into a whirlwind. I called the movers I had scheduled. White glove service. They arrived at 9 a.m. I didn't move the furniture, I had sold the house, partially furnished, to sweeten the deal for the investors. I left the sofas, the dining table, the heavy beds. I didn't want them anyway. They held too many memories of Mark. But I took my clothes. I took my books. I took my art supplies. By 2 p.m., the house felt different. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a stage set. I went into Mark's closet. I grabbed 5 large black trash bags. I didn't pack his suits nicely. I swept them off the hangers in armfuls and stuffed them into the bags. His shoes? Thrown in. His precious golf trophies? Tossed on top. I dragged the bags out to the front curb. It looked like trash day. I wrote a note on a piece of sticky paper and stuck it to one of the bags. Mark's stuff. Then, I did something petty. I admit it. I went to the master bathroom. Mark had a collection of very expensive colognes. I took the caps off all of them and poured them down the sink. Then I filled the bottles with water and put them back on the shelf. I went to the kitchen. I took his favorite expensive scotch, the Blue Label, poured it into a Tupperware container to take with me, and filled the empty bottle with weak iced tea. If he was going to leave me with nothing, I was going to leave him with illusions. At 4 p.m., I did a final walkthrough. The house echoed. It was beautiful. It was majestic. And it wasn't mine anymore. I stood in the foyer. I looked at the grand staircase where I had imagined taking family photos with children we never had. Goodbye, I whispered to the house. Thank you for protecting me. I walked out the front door and locked it. I put the key under the mat, as instructed by the new owner's agent who would be arriving shortly to change the locks. I got into my car. My suitcase was in the trunk. My bank account was full. My heart was pounding with a mix of terror and exhilaration. I drove to a hotel downtown, the Four Seasons. I checked into a suite. I took a long, hot shower. I put on my black silk dress. I applied my makeup with the precision of a warrior putting on war paint. I checked the tracker on Mark's car. Yes, I had put an AirTag in his trunk 3 days ago. He was at the Golden Oak. I checked Jessica's Instagram. She had just posted a story, date night with my favorite person. Big news coming. I looked at myself in the mirror. Big news indeed, I said to my reflection. I grabbed the envelope with the closing documents. I grabbed my clutch. I drove to the restaurant. And that brings us back to the moment where Mark is screaming my name and the glass is shattering on the floor. As I walked out of the Golden Oak, the cool night air hit my face. I could hear Mark's footsteps running after me. Sarah! Sarah, stop! I reached my car. I unlocked it. Mark grabbed my arm. His grip was tight. Painful. Let go of me, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You can't do this, Mark was panting, sweat beading on his forehead. You can't just sell the house. I have plans for that equity. Plans? I raised an eyebrow. You mean the debt you owe? The people who are going to break your legs? Mark went pale. You know? I know everything, Mark, I yanked my arm free. I know about the debt. I know about Jessica. I know about the mental instability plot. I have the iPad. Mark recoiled as if I had slapped him. The iPad? The one you left logged in. The one with the video of you and Jess in my bed. He looked at me with pure horror. He realized in that second that he wasn't the hunter. He was the prey. Sarah, his voice broke. He tried to switch tactics. He tried to look pathetic. Baby, please. I'm in trouble. Serious trouble. If I don't show them proof of assets, they'll kill me. You have the money. Help me. We're married. You can't let them hurt me. I looked at this man. This man who had called me useless. This man who had plotted to put me in a mental institution just to steal my money. I opened my car door. You're right, Mark. We are married, I said. Which is why I suggest you call a lawyer. Because the only thing you're getting from me is divorce papers. But I'm homeless, he wailed. Where am I supposed to go tonight? I smiled. I hear the Motel 6 off the highway has vacancy. You know the one. You and Jess seem to like it there. I got in the car and slammed the door. I locked it. Mark banged on the window. Sarah. Sarah. I put the car in drive and pulled away. I watched him in the rearview mirror, standing on the sidewalk, shrinking smaller and smaller until he was just a speck in the distance. I turned on the radio. I turned it up loud. I was homeless. I was single. And I had never felt more free. But here is the thing about revenge. You think it ends when you drop the bomb. You think walking away is the finale. It wasn't. Because while I had destroyed Mark's plan, I had underestimated just how desperate, and how dangerous, he and Jessica would become when they had nothing left to lose. I thought the war was over. But as I drove to my hotel, my phone started ringing. It wasn't Mark. It was the police. The phone screen lit up the dark interior of my car. Unknown caller. My heart skipped a beat, not out of fear, but out of a strange, grim anticipation. I swiped right. This is Mrs. Jenkins? A deep voice asked. Ms. Jenkins, I corrected automatically. The separation wasn't legal on paper yet, but in my soul, I was already single. Who is this? This is Officer Miller with the Roswell Police Department. We have a situation at 42 Oakwood Drive. A Mr. Mark Jenkins is currently in the back of my patrol car. He attempted to kick down the front door. He's claiming it's his residence and that he's been locked out illegally. He's quite agitated, ma'am. A slow, satisfied smile spread across my face. It was the kind of smile that would have scared the old Sarah. Officer, I am the former owner of that property. The sale closed yesterday. The deed has been transferred. Mr. Jenkins does not own that home, his name was never on the title, and he has no right to be there. The new owners have full possession. That matches what the security company said, the officer replied, sounding tired. He's screaming about a conspiracy. He's demanding we call you to clear this up. I can come down there, I said, my voice smooth as silk. I have the closing documents in my car. I'd be happy to clear it up. I didn't have to go. I could have just told the officer to book him. But I wanted to see it. I wanted the image of Mark in the back of a squad car burned into my retinas forever. It was the closure I needed. I turned the car around and drove back toward the house. When I arrived, the quiet cul-de-sac was lit up like a disco. 3 patrol cars. Blue and red lights bouncing off the Victorian facade I had lovingly restored. Neighbors were on their porches in bathrobes, phones out, recording everything. Mrs. Henderson, my nosy but sweet neighbor, was practically live-streaming from her hydrangeas. I parked and stepped out. The air was cool. I smoothed my black silk dress and walked toward the chaos. Mark was in the back of the cruiser, his face pressed against the window. He looked deranged. His tie was crooked, his hair was wild, and he was shouting something I couldn't hear through the glass. Jessica was standing by Mark's car, sobbing into a tissue. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed into slits of pure venom. She stomped over to me in her high heels, looking like a disheveled pageant queen. "You did this," she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. "You crazy B***tch. You called the cops on your own husband?" "I didn't call anyone, Jess," I said calmly, stepping past her. "The new owners have a silent alarm. Mark must have tripped it when he tried to break in. It's a felony, you know. Breaking and entering." I walked up to Officer Miller and handed him the file. "Here is the deed transfer, the bill of sale, and the wire confirmation. As you can see, the property belongs to the Oakwood Investment Group as of 9 a.m. yesterday." The officer shone his flashlight on the papers. "Looks airtight to me." He walked over to the cruiser and opened the door. Mark practically fell out, red-faced and spitting mad. "Tell him, Sarah." Mark bellowed. "Tell him this is my house. Tell him it's a marital asset and you can't sell it without my permission." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had washed socks for. The man I had nursed through the flu. The man who had plotted to put me in a psych ward. "Officer," I said loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "This man has no legal claim to this property. It was inherited solely by me. It was maintained by me. And it was sold by me. He is trespassing. Sarah, please." Mark's voice cracked, shifting instantly from anger to begging. The desperation was seeping through. "They're going to arrest me. I have a record. I can't have a record. The dealership. You should have thought about that before you tried to kick down a door that doesn't belong to you," I said coldly. "But where am I going to sleep?" he wailed. A grown man, wailing. I looked at Jessica. "I believe your girlfriend has a pull-out couch. Or maybe you can use the money you saved by not buying me an anniversary gift to get a hotel room." "Oh wait, you spent that on the necklace for her, didn't you?" The officer grabbed Mark's arm. "All right, sir. You're coming with us. We'll process you for trespassing and attempted burglary." "Burglary?" Mark screamed as they shoved him back into the car. "I live here." "Not anymore," I whispered. As the police car pulled away, Jessica stood there, alone on the curb. The reality of her situation was crashing down on her. She had bet on the wrong horse. She thought she was stealing a king and a castle. Instead, she was left with the court jester and a mountain of legal fees. "You know," I said to Jessica, who was trembling, "I really hope you kept the receipt for that necklace. You're going to need the cash for his bail." I got back in my car and drove away. I didn't look back. The house was dark now. The show was over. But my war? My war was just moving to a new battlefield. The next few days were a blur of legal motions and vindication. I stayed at the Four Seasons, ordering room service and watching the city skyline. It felt like a detox. Every hour I spent away from Mark, I felt my strength returning. But Mark wasn't done. And neither were the people he owed money to. 3 days after the arrest, I was leaving my hotel to meet David Thorne when a man approached me in the parking garage. He was wearing a cheap suit, but he didn't look like a businessman. He looked like a cinder block in a tie. "Mrs. Jenkins," he grunted. "Ms. Jenkins," I corrected, gripping my keys. "Can I help you?" "We're looking for Mark," the man said. He didn't move aggressively, but his presence was heavy. "He's not answering his phone. We went to the house on Oakwood, but there's a construction crew there. They said it was sold." "It was," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Mark doesn't live there anymore. And frankly, I don't know where he is. We're separated." The man chewed on a toothpick. "That's unfortunate. Mark owes my employer a significant sum. He used the house as collateral. Said he'd have the equity out by the end of the month." I laughed. A dry, harsh sound. "Well, he lied to you. Just like he lied to me. The house was never his to leverage. I suggest you find him before he leaves town. I hear he's staying with a Ms. Jessica Miller. She owns Serenity Now Spa on Main Street." The man nodded, a flicker of appreciation in his eyes. "Thanks for the tip." I got in my car and locked the doors. I wasn't scared for myself. I knew the law. Mark's debt was personal. Unless I had co-signed, which I hadn't, or unless it was for marital necessities, which gambling debts certainly aren't, they couldn't touch my millions. But Mark? Mark was about to have a very bad day. I drove to David's office. We had a deposition scheduled. Mark's lawyer, a slimy guy named Rick who looked like he chased ambulances for fun, had filed an emergency motion to freeze my assets. They were claiming I had sold marital property illegally and that I was mentally unstable. They were actually going through with the gaslighting plot. We sat in the conference room. Mark was there, looking haggard. He was wearing the same suit from the night of the arrest, looking rumpled. Jessica wasn't there. "My client," Rick began, puffing out his chest, "contends that Mrs. Jenkins has been suffering from paranoia and memory loss for months. She sold the family home in a manic episode. We are asking the court to reverse the sale and place the funds in a conservatorship under Mr. Jenkins' control." David Thorne just smiled. He didn't even look up from his notepad. "Is that so? And what evidence do you have of this mania?" "Mr. Jenkins has documented instances," Rick said, sliding a folder across the table. "She forgot conversations. She misplaced items constantly. She was hallucinating infidelity." "Hallucinating," David repeated. He looked at me. "Sarah, would you like to present Exhibit A?" I pulled the iPad out of my bag. Mark froze. His eyes locked onto the device. He recognized the sticker on the back, an Atlanta Falcons logo he had put there years ago. "This," I said, sliding the iPad across the table, "is Mark's old device. He forgot to log out of his cloud account. It contains 6 months of messages between Mark and Jessica Miller. It also contains a video." I pressed play. The sound of Mark's voice filled the quiet conference room. "I'm working on the gaslighting angle. She's already questioning her memory. If we play this right, we get the house, we get the equity, and she gets the cats." Mark's lawyer turned pale. He stopped the video. He looked at Mark. "You said she was crazy," Rick hissed at Mark. "You didn't tell me you were making her crazy." It was a joke." Mark stammered. "Role play. It doesn't mean anything." "It proves intent to defraud," David Thorne said, his voice thundering now. "It proves conspiracy to commit abuse. It proves that the mental instability was a fabricated narrative to steal her inheritance. If you pursue this motion, Rick, I will file for sanctions against you personally for bringing a frivolous suit. And I will send this video to the district attorney. Rick closed his folder. He stood up. He looked at Mark with pure disgust. I'm withdrawing the motion, Rick said. And I'm withdrawing as your counsel. You're on your own, Mark. I don't represent sociopaths who lie to me. Rick walked out. Mark sat there, alone at the big table. The silence was deafening. Mark, I said softly. The debt collectors found me today. I gave them Jessica's address. You might want to run. Mark didn't say a word. He just put his head in his hands. The fallout was swift and brutal. Mark lost his job the next day. News of the arrest and the looming debt collectors reached the dealership owner. They sell luxury cars, they sell an image. They couldn't have a manager who was being hunted by loan sharks and sued by his wife for fraud. I heard about it from a friend who worked in the service department. Security escorted him out, he told me. He was crying, Sarah. Actually crying in the showroom. But I wasn't done with Jessica. Jessica, who had smiled in my face while sleeping with my husband. Jessica, who owed me $10,000. I looked at the promissory note she had signed 5 years ago. It was a simple contract, handwritten, but notarized. I, Jessica Miller, promised to repay Sarah Jenkins the sum of $10,000 within 5 years, or upon demand if the business becomes profitable. Her business was profitable. She was always bragging about her margins on Instagram. I walked into Serenity Now on a Tuesday afternoon. The spa smelled like lavender and betrayal. Jessica was at the front desk, looking stressed. Her phone was ringing, and she was ignoring it. When she looked up and saw me, she flinched. Get out, she hissed. Haven't you done enough? Mark is living on my couch. He's drinking all day. The repo man took his car this morning from my driveway. My neighbors are talking. Sounds stressful, I said, leaning on the counter. Maybe you should try some lavender oil? What do you want, Sarah? I pulled out the promissory note. You owe me $10,000, Jess. The 5-year mark was last week. And according to this clause, repayment in full upon demand. I'm demanding it. Jessica laughed. I don't have $10,000. I'm supporting your deadbeat husband. Not my problem, I said. If you don't pay me within 24 hours, I'll file a lien against your business equipment. The massage tables, the sauna, the espresso machine. I'll take it all. I have a very expensive lawyer now, Jess. And he's bored. You're a monster, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. We were sisters. Sisters don't sleep with their sister's husband in her own bed, I replied, my voice hard as diamond. Sisters don't plot to have their friend committed to a psych ward. You killed the sisterhood, Jess. I'm just burying the body. She paid me. I don't know how she did it. Maybe she maxed out her credit cards. Maybe she borrowed from her parents. But the check arrived at David's office the next day. I took that check, $10,000, and I donated it to a women's shelter in downtown Atlanta. A shelter for victims of domestic abuse and financial manipulation. I put it in Jessica's name so she'd get the tax receipt. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. I didn't have to do anything else to destroy them. They did it to themselves. Evil, when it loses its power source, tends to eat itself. Mark and Jessica were trapped in her small 2-bedroom apartment. Mark had no job, no car, and no money. Jessica was working double shifts to pay the bills and Mark's legal fees, because he still thought he could sue me for the house equity, even though every lawyer told him he was delusional. The love they shared, that spark Mark claimed was missing from our marriage, evaporated the moment the credit cards were declined. I heard the details from mutual friends who were enjoying the gossip a little too much. It's a war zone over there, my friend Linda told me over coffee. Mark sits around in his underwear playing video games all day. Jessica screams at him to get a job. He told her she's nagging him just like Sarah did. Can you believe that? I chuckled, sipping my latte. Oh, I can believe it. Mark doesn't want a partner. He wants a mommy. And Jessica didn't sign up to be a mommy to a broke 48-year-old man. The end came 2 weeks later. I received a call from Jessica. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello? He stole my jewelry, Jessica sobbed. No hello, no preamble. Just raw, ugly crying. Sarah, he stole the necklace he gave me. And my grandmother's ring. He pawned them. He said he needed money to pay off the guys who were threatening him. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, looking at the view of the lake from my new rental. You should call the police. I can't, she wailed. If I call the police, he'll tell them about the drugs. Drugs? He's been coping, she sniffled. Sarah, please. I know you hate me. But you know him. How do I get him out? He won't leave. He says he has squatters' rights. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. The man who tried to kick me out of my own home was now refusing to leave hers. Eviction process takes 30 days, Jess, I said, quoting Mark's own words from that night at the restaurant. Unless you change the locks when he's out. But be careful. He has a temper when he's cornered. I miss you, she whispered. I miss our friendship. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. He's not who I thought he was. He's exactly who he is, I said. You just didn't look close enough because you were blinded by the shine of my life. You wanted my life, Jess? Congratulations. You got the husband. You got the drama. You just didn't get the money. And that's the only part that made Mark tolerable. I hung up. I blocked her number. I didn't feel hate anymore. I just felt nothing. They were strangers to me now. Just characters in a bad movie I had walked out of. While their lives were burning down, mine was rising from the ashes. I took my $2.5 million, minus taxes and legal fees, but still a very healthy sum, and I started looking for a new dream. I didn't want another mansion. I didn't want a status symbol. I wanted peace. I found it in a small town in the North Georgia mountains. It was a cottage on the edge of a lake. It wasn't grand. It had peeling paint and an overgrown garden. It needed work. Mark would have hated it. He would have called it a dump. I bought it cash. For the first time in 15 years, I renovated a house for me. I painted the kitchen yellow, bright, sunny yellow, because Mark had always insisted on neutral beige for resale value. I tore down the walls I wanted to tear down. I built a studio facing the water where I could paint. I wasn't Mark's wife anymore. I wasn't the victim. I was Sarah. Just Sarah. One afternoon, I was painting on my deck, watching the sunset reflect off the water. The air smelled of pine needles and damp earth. I had paint in my hair and I was wearing those same old jeans Mark hated. I felt beautiful. My phone buzzed. It was David Thorne. Good news, Sarah, his voice crackled. The divorce decree is ready. Mark signed it. He didn't have a choice. He has no lawyer, and he's currently facing charges for the theft of Ms. Miller's property. Jessica had finally called the cops. He signed away all rights to your assets in exchange for you not pressing further fraud charges regarding the iPad video. It's over? I asked, putting down my brush. It's over, David said. You're a free woman. Congratulations. I looked at the divorce papers on my email later that night. His signature was shaky. It looked like the signature of a defeated man. I didn't feel a surge of joy. I felt a deep, quiet peace. Like the silence after a thunderstorm passes. I poured myself a glass of wine, a cheap, delicious red that I liked, not the expensive labels Mark drank to impress people. I toasted the empty room. To Sarah, I said aloud. It's been 6 months since that night at the Golden Oak. People ask me if I regret it. They ask if I regret selling the family home. They say, but it was your grandmother's legacy. Wasn't it hard to let go? And I tell them this, a house is just wood and stone. A legacy isn't about property. It's about strength. My grandmother didn't leave me that house so I could be a prisoner in it. She left me that house so I would have a safety net. And when the time came, I used that net to save my life. Mark is currently doing community service and living in a rented room in a basement somewhere. He works at a used car lot now, the kind with the inflatable tube men dancing in the wind. I saw him once, from a distance, when I was in town. He looked older. He looked tired. He looked ordinary. Jessica lost her spa. The reputation damage from the scandal, combined with the debt she took on for Mark, sank her business. She moved back in with her parents in Ohio. I heard she's working as a receptionist. And me? I'm sitting on my deck, writing this to you. I'm planning a trip to Italy next month. Solo. I'm going to eat pasta and drink wine and look at art, and I'm not going to check in with anyone. I learned something vital in that restaurant. I learned that for years, I had allowed myself to be a supporting character in Mark's movie. I made myself small so he could feel big. I dimmed my light so he could shine. But when he tried to write me out of the script entirely, he forgot one thing: I was the one holding the pen. I was the one paying the budget. To anyone watching this who feels stuck. To anyone who suspects their partner is dimming their light. To anyone who is afraid to look at the iPad, or the receipt, or the bank statement because they're afraid of what they might find, look. Look at the truth. It will hurt. It will burn like fire. But fire cleanses. Fire clears the dead wood so new things can grow. Don't be afraid to burn it down. Don't be afraid to sell the house, sign the papers, and walk out the door. Because on the other side of the fire, there is a peace you can't imagine. There is a yellow kitchen. There is a lake at sunset. And there is the incredible, intoxicating realization that you are enough. I'm Sarah. I'm 46. I'm single, I'm rich, and I'm finally, truly, home. Thanks for listening. If you liked this story, share it with a friend who needs a reminder of their own strength. You never know who is planning their own escape.